Thank you, Chair. Look, I don't mean it to be like this, but it's going to sound like I'm overly critical and you all are not the problem. But, oh my God, you have described an absolutely staggering, astonishing volume of dollars, which the country didn't have and had to borrow from China to pay for these things. And now you need more money to make sure that the people in the agencies don't rob the taxpayer of further dollars. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like a Franz Kafka novel. So being a student of Willie Sutton, you remember the guy that robbed the banks and they asked him why he robbed the banks? He said, that's where the money is. You guys have the money. I mean, I didn't really do a running tally of the amounts, but would you all agree that that is a staggering amount of money that is aggregated in what we are talking about today? I mean, I can't remember ever having had a hearing about that number of dollars, and yet you're telling us, to a person, you can't manage to make sure that these funds are properly expended unless you get more money. And, you know, I'm sorry for people watching this, if anyone is. I hope they are. They probably aren't. But for anyone watching this, they're not going to understand. You could not run a business that way. You could not just go into debt indefinitely. Your share value would be zero by the end of the day, and you'd be as broke as cryptocurrency. So, again, this is going to sound critical. I don't mean for it to, but am I correct in the statement that this staggering amount of money that we're talking about today is likely money that had to be borrowed from somewhere? Mr. O'Donnell, I'll start with you.
That's not my expertise, but I wanted to just make one point here with respect to the funding for my agency and for the others, is independent audit, whether it's a corporation or the government, is an essential function of that sort of three lines of defense and making sure that money is spent well and in compliance. And what we're saying here today is not to give us new money, but to actually use the money that's already been given to pay for that independent audit so we can make sure that third line of defense is there.
Sure, that was part of the CFO Act from the 1990s in the George Herbert Walker Bush administration when they were trying to get control over this. But unfortunately, every dollar that we're talking about is going to be borrowed. And what has happened to the interest rate in the 2.5 years of the Biden administration? It's gone through the roof. So, you know, again, I apologize if I sound, and I'm not frustrated with you, but having spent part of the morning in a budget hearing and seeing all the charts and graphs that literally go off the top, I don't see how it's sustainable what the Democrats have put us into. Mr. O'Donnell, let me just ask you too, because I think I saw in your written statement the comment that these funds will remain available until expended. Is that correct?
For the IIJA, that is. For most of those, that's true, though, and I believe if you look at them in terms of the state revolving funds, those funds will revolve back, and so they will, in some sense, perpetuate.
Yes, perpetuate, thank you. That is the word I was looking for, and I couldn't find. So all of the dollars that you are talking about also are compounded by the fact that interest will have to be paid on those dollars. And again, as we heard this morning in another budget hearing, we are very quickly on the road where we're going to be spending more money, mandatory spending, on the interest payments than we spend on defense of the United States, which again is an untenable situation in a very dangerous world. Mr. Gaffigan, let me just ask you this, because my office is on the west side of this building, and I look out over the expanse of the Hubert Humphrey building. And for the last 3 years, I swear there has not been a soul in that building. Is it expensive to maintain a federal building that is not occupied?
There's a lot of work on sort of real property and trying to minimize footprints. And I know with the pandemic, that's created a whole new set of questions for agencies in terms of whether they need to reduce their footprint.
I would say it's been pretty effectively reduced for the last 3 years. There's a little daycare center that I can see from my window, and there hasn't been a child playing in the daycare center since March of 2020. It's an expensive proposition, and it's one that really, at some point, we're going to have to get our hands around. Ms. Donaldson, this committee came to fame with the investigations over the cylinder funding, with which you are very familiar. What do you think about the DOE loan authority? Is that going to continue to be a risky program where there's the continued risk for dollars going where they weren't supposed to?
I think they're staffing up and working very hard right now, and the future will tell. I actually wasn't the Inspector General during Solyndra, so I've reviewed the reports, and you know a lot more about Solyndra than I do, I would hazard a guess.
Yeah, Mr. Griffith rose to fame on those investigations. Look, these are serious problems, and I don't mean to make light of them. I do appreciate your efforts because I think they're extremely important. It's just extremely frustrating to me that someone talked about the next generation of Americans. We have burdened them with an untenable amount of debt, and unfortunately, they're the ones who are going to have to pay it. I thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you. The chair calls on Ms. Chakowski for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you so much. For decades, companies have outsourced the manufacturing of, oh, sorry. Let's start over.